Strange, because I met Mason in Manchester United training ground about 3 weeks ago before the announcement was made. So I had to be very careful what to say to him. But we had a little conversation. We've had a conversation since. And what I want to do is to go, like I'm going to do with everybody when I get back, is to go meet them, is to have a conversation with them and find out the reality of the situation and whether they actually want to come all the way here to play for Jamaica. Again, it's the commitment of the players. So there are two players who should be of interest to us. They're very good players. And I will be making sure that I have a conversation with all the players. The President, Mr. Speed, Mr. Chung have shown me a list of potential targets, potential lists. I know them all very well. I know their agents well. And believe you me, when I get home, I'll be busy on the phone.
He'll be busy on.
Can I ask Alexis? Does Steve McLaren still have a little Dutch accent going on there?
You needed to see his most recent interview at the airport, leaving Jamaica to come back to the UK to pack his bags. He came with a little bit of a Dutch accent, and he's leaving with a little bit of a Jamaican twang. So I say by the end of September, he will be one of our own, and he'll be ready for Carnival next year, Shaka.
Because when he was manager at 20, he did this ridiculous interview. And I heard it the first time then, I thought, well, maybe it's me. But second time around, anyway, carry on. What were you going to say?
You're hearing right. But we'll definitely talk about accents soon, because I'm pretty sure the Jamaican one is going to grow on him. Wow. Mason Greenwood. Now, this is a rumor that has been going around for at least the better part of a year and a half, that was news that obviously Mason Greenwood, in terms of Gareth Southgate's England, was not going to happen. And then he was considering his Jamaican roots and potentially playing for Jamaica. Steve McLaren, they're confirming that he has indeed reached out to the player, and they have had multiple chats about it. They just have to see the absolute commitment. My question, though, Shaka, when we're talking about the Leon Bailey thing and the culture of a team, the morale of a team, we know the bad headlines that come with a Mason Greenwood. Now, on the club level, it seems like some clubs, besides Manchester United, they said absolutely not anymore. He has since gone to Marseille. We have seen him play in La Liga as well. But for Jamaica and in terms of this push now for the World Cup, is this something you would want to see them do or approach?
That's a difficult one because of those headlines that you mentioned. And quite clearly, England won't touch him. Premier League clubs won't touch him, certainly for the time being, and he's found success on the continent, as you mentioned, both in Spain and in France. Now, it's a really delicate situation, kind of given the headlines, but then the threat of legal action, and then the dropping of said legal action, and the old adage that you're innocent until proven guilty. And I'm not sure that certainly in a court of law, I'm certain in a court of law, he hasn't been. So whether Jamaica want to take on those headlines and kind of understanding culturally how misogyny and domestic violence have been issues for many of us in the Caribbean. Do you want to laud a player with that kind of a background? Again, not that it's been through the courts, but the headlines kind of speak for themselves. From a footballing perspective, it's an easy decision in terms of talent. From a footballing perspective, he would be playing. He'd be in the England squad right now. So no question that he makes Jamaica better. But it just comes down to how Jamaica, how the JFF are able to manage the press, the media, and all that comes with a Mason Greenwood. And then ultimately, and this is a pretty sad testament, football fans in the end care about one thing. If Mason Greenwood scores the goal that takes Jamaica to the World Cup, everybody will celebrate it, at least in the short term. That is both again, the blessing and the curse of our game.
Yeah, Herc, as Shaka said, from a footballing perspective, this definitely makes sense. I will tell you, majority of Jamaicans are 100% excited about this because we know how good and lethal Mason Greenwood can be once he's on that pitch. In terms of a proven goal scorer as well, right now we're looking at probably a Mikel Antonio, but 2 years from now, will he be fit and ready to lead that line for Jamaica at that World Cup? Or would you take a Mason Greenwood from a footballing perspective? But can you separate the two in this instance then?
Yeah, that's the question. And I think that's an individual question for every fan or person or pundit out there. It's a tricky one because when you address Mason Greenwood, you have to address both sides of this. And unfortunately, the first one isn't the footballing side. It's on the human level. And why Shaq is right, like he's not been convicted of anything. He hasn't been to court, although I would argue the court of public approval, and that's the one he's fighting. That's the battle he's fighting most right now. And I am nobody to judge him if his significant other has forgiven him, if they've gone through their own retribution, gone through their own therapy. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like these actions have been made public so people can see that he's making amends for the wrongs that he's done in his past. But certainly from a footballing standpoint, he seems to tick off a lot of boxes. But this is a situation where you've got to be very careful if you're Jamaica for the reasons that Shaka clearly stated. If it's just footballing purposes, just footballing reasons, it makes a lot of sense. 22 years old, Manchester United, he's got pedigree. Getafe, he scored, I believe, 8-9 goals. A lot of those goals were bangers. He seems to be back to his best football. He's at Marseille right now, preseason scoring some goals. It seems to make sense on the field, but it's much more than just what you're doing on the field. You need to send a message of where your program's growing, and it needs to be a reflection of what you want your society to be in some way, shape, or form. So if you do it, hopefully there's a message of therapy, retribution, that it's going somewhere and you have learned from these wrongs.
I think Herc makes a very good point there. Listen, the U.S. had a similar situation not so long ago with Greg Berhalter and things that he did in his past that kind of were thrown out into the public sphere. And he addressed them. And while to Berhalter's point was those things happened when he was much younger, it certainly wasn't played out in a public way. And he dealt with it with his then girlfriend and now wife in a similarly private manner. Mason Greenwood, again, is a young man, and we should not be judged by our indiscretions as young men. We grow out of that, or you'd like to think so. But regardless, given who he was, it was very public in the way that it spilt out to us. And so I think while he may have gone through the exact same steps that Berhalter did in terms of addressing those feelings, addressing his issues, those have to similarly be public in an effort to not only be better yourself, but to send the message that this was wrong, and I have addressed it, and send that message to other people who may be going through the same thing. I think had that been more public, had his kind of his healing, let's call it, been more public, I think there'd be a better sentiment around Mason Greenwood, and not just in terms of Spain or France or Jamaica. There'd be a better global sentiment around Mason Greenwood.
Well, one quick final question for Shaka before we let him go. Shaka, just in terms of the recruitment for the Reggae Boys, as we said, Mason Greenwood is just one name on quite a good-looking list, I might say, because we're talking about Morgan Gibbs-White from Forest, Reece Nelson from Arsenal, Ben Godfrey, who's now at Atalanta. When you see the fact that Steve McLaren says he knows these players, their agents, he knows how to talk to them, and I suppose convince them of their commitment to want to play for Jamaica, considering they're not in the current England setup, could we be the Manchester City of CONCACAF? Squad them, I'm talking. I love how everyone's got some Jamaican in them. Find someone's cat.
I'm not sure how you draw a parallel between Steve McLaren and Pep Guardiola, just like that. Pep Guardiola sounds more English than Steve McLaren. That's about all I can offer. Listen, Jamaica are the powerhouse in Caribbean football. As I said earlier, for my money, they're the fourth best. Potentially should be the fourth best team in CONCACAF without question. They should qualify. Improved or increased recruitment only makes them better. Just having kind of been there myself, I also understand the balance between bringing in players who have lived their entire lives abroad and qualify through parentage, and finding that balance with local players and that link with the local fan base, which is every bit as important. Because while you have foreign-based players coming to play for Jamaica, it's all Jamaicans that are going to be in the office in Kingston, and they have to feel that connection with their national team.
Well, Shaka, we only reclaimed our power in football the day you retired. Then it became easy to score on everyone. Shaka, the great of Trinidad and Tobago. Shaka, always an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for hanging with us. We're going to let you go, and hopefully you can hang with us again soon.
Absolutely. I look forward to it.